Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm David.
And this is the Practical Guitarist Podcast.
The podcast for people who eat, sleep, and breathe guitar. Good evening, Jim.
Good evening, David.
I didn't know if you were seeing the countdown there, so I made it an extra long number 2.
Yeah.
Followed by an extremely short number 1.
I had an extra long number 2 earlier today.
I don't want to know that. I just don't. No.
This is premiere of the video.
Yeah. This is only the second time we've done this.
So, yeah. Now you're sure we're going to get audio out of this thing, right?
I hope so. I really do.
Yeah, folks, the last one, we had an echo.
Yeah, because I left my internal audio on, including the Skype stream that was coming out into OBS, so the software we're trying to do this with. And so what was happening was that you would get my audio, and then you would get my audio again like 2 seconds later. So we're not doing that this episode. This is the second set of 2 hours that we're using to record very much the same material.
Very much. I'm going to try to condense it. Different.
And maybe it'll make more sense and it'll sound less like rambling this time.
It was very rambling the last time. I said that I wasn't going to get sleepy, and by the end of the last one, I was yawning.
Yeah. Well, I always yawn during the episode. I don't know what the hell that's all about. Usually, and the thing is, we recorded early last time. Actually, we're recording earlier this time. Yeah. But, yeah. So... Anyway, lots of good stuff's happening in the guitar world right now. First thing I want to do is talk about, the passing of Little Richard.
Yep.
If you're not familiar with Little Richard, I was listening to Long Tall Sally this weekend, and all I could think about was Predator. The scene when they're on the helicopter, using some very choice language that would have been more palatable in the decade in which that film was released.
Yep.
I was gonna quote some of it, but I'm not gonna. Anyway, yeah. So Little Richard, man, what an impact he had on rock and roll in general. And yes, obviously he's a piano player. But I can't help but think that we wouldn't have had people like Prince without Little Richard first. Yeah. Who obviously, whether you want to believe that Prince did or not, obviously idolized Little Richard. That's pretty clear to me. The vocal style, the outrageous attire, all that stuff seems to be a direct descendant of Prince. Anyway, so yeah, hats off to Little Richard. Apparently it's not a COVID-related death, so that's kind of interesting too. Did we lost somebody else over the weekend too? I think. I forget who. Anyway, yeah.
We did.
You got anything to say, Jim?
We lost Jerry Stiller.
Oh, that's right. Jerry Stiller was the other one. And I think there was one more.
There was. I'm trying to remember. And it's not that the person is not important.
No, it's just that there's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, and it's hard to keep anything straight. In fact, actually, Little Richard isn't in my show notes. I had to pull for that one out of the air.
Somebody had mentioned somebody else, and it's not the two we mentioned because they said it was COVID related, and so I kept my political views to myself.
Of course, Roy Horn, but I don't think he had an effect on the music industry.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
But we've been losing people right and left, and many of them are COVID related deaths. So just a little interesting to note. So if you've been following along in the Facebook group, if you haven't, the URL is down below us if you're watching this on video. Otherwise, it'll be in the show notes. Join the Facebook group. We have a very active community there. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's a great way to communicate with Jim and I directly. And I do cool stuff in there, and Jim does cool stuff in there that doesn't necessarily make the show. But one of the things I did last week, I've got this wild hair from some show listeners, but mainly from Mike Mara and his board, gave me some inspiration to check out soldered cables again. I've been using George L. solderless cables on my board for a very long time. And I've always kind of wondered if I'm missing something tonally from using solderless cables versus soldered cable. So now that I'm going to kind of switch back, well, I'm not really switching back. So basically what I did was I bought the stuff to make soldered cable, and I'm holding some of it right here.
Yep.
This is the my cable, and I actually got these really cool, I got the square plugins. So they're supposed to be, really good for like putting on your pedal board. And it's supposed to be really compact. I bought those, but I hadn't really like. I was gonna pull the trigger, and then I got to think. I was like, do I really know this is gonna be better? Do I really know this is gonna be worse? Like, so I thought, hey, I've got soldered cables sitting around, and I've got solderless cables sitting around, and I have a DAW, and I have a guitar, so I can test them.
Yep.
George L's on top, folks. So, couple things. If you listen to the test, you'll hear that the George L has noticeably like more top end stuff going on, and that's because it's a lower capacitance cable. It's 22 per foot, I think, picofarads per foot, which means that it has less capacitance than the Proco cable that I was also holding, which has right around, I want to say like 44 PF per foot. Which means that you get more like low mids coming through on the other cable, and it's really just a perception thing. You can perceive it easily because you don't hear as much treble. It's not that you're losing anything on the George L. You're actually getting more, but it's not as pronounced because your ears are balancing it differently. And of course, the way you use your devices, you might even actually push the gain harder, like the volume knob on a pedal harder, to make up for that lack of treble, and it gives you more oomph and fatness in your sound. So that's kind of the thought process. Now, obviously, the clips that I posted, the differences are very subtle. It's actually very hard to hear. I would recommend, if you're going to listen to them, you want to have a really good pair of headphones or a pair of studio monitors. And you're going to have to turn it up, and you're probably going to have to strain your ears a bit. But what you're going to hear is basically that the George L's have more treble. The interesting thing is that the George L cable, you would think you're not going to get as much treble because it's a thinner cable. And I think a lot of my bias towards George L's has come from people in forums, and this is me kind of being embarrassed to admit that I've been listening to people and not doing my own research. But a lot of people have told me over the years that solderless cables are not reliable. Now, I'm here to tell you that's bunk, right? Number one, I've been using George L's for almost 15 years. I don't think I've ever had one fail live. And the only ones I've ever had fail at home were because I didn't put them together right. And once I got the knack for that, like, it became easy. And I can give you some tips if you're interested, but I mean, they're really specific to the George L brand. As
Right.
Jim, you've used solderless cables, right?
Right.
Like you're
Yeah.
using something right now.
Yeah, I use the Planet Waves.
Okay. So in the George L cables, the way that they work is very similar to the Planet Waves. We examined your Planet Waves. They're much a thicker cable. They're
Right.
definitely wider diameter.
Yep.
And
But
that's kind of
the wire
important.
inside is extremely thin. But the
Yeah.
plastic, the rubber, whatever you want to call it, that's
The jacket.
Yeah, the jacketing is really thick.
Yeah, and it protects the cable better.
Right. But the thing is that so somebody who may not know, they know enough about wiring to be dangerous. Physically thinner wire, copper, presents different resistance at different frequencies, right?
Right.
So this is why two copper or two pair works for, when you go into DSL and you talk about DSL and how two pair works and how it's got to be twisted.
And it also has to do with the purity of the copper as well. It's not just, because all copper you buy is gonna be an impure metal.
Right.
It's gonna have impurities in it, and the more pure copper you get, the less impure it's gonna be, and therefore, essentially, the idea is that you'll have a better signal flow through it.
And and even at distance, like you talk about DSL and you talk about, okay, I got a twisted pair and it could go 3 miles without being without losing signal at a maximum, and so on and so forth, because the highest amount that we're trying to go through there is this many megahertz at that time, or megabytes, which goes a lot higher than that. But anyway, what happens is that the twisting of the pair then becomes a solid line, and you lose the ability to distinguish ones and zeros and so on and so forth. It's just, but anyway, I'm oversimplifying. The the way that our signal runs through our cables, obviously, is we change frequencies consistently. Therefore, the cable, in theory and in practice, does change in its resistance to that. Now, what happens with a capacitor, what's happened with capacitance, is that's a similar thing to what's happening in a twisted pair. So you notice when you open it, you've got a core, right? And you got a shield. Mm-hmm. And what you don't want to have happen, right, is you don't want to have your core sound jumping to the shield, right? That right. Shouldn't happen. So you create capacitance, which is a standing wave inside the shield, higher frequencies, so on and so forth. You got those types of things. I mean, we're not working in super high frequencies. We're working at audible frequencies, but nonetheless, that's why we tend to not want to create any real standing waves at whatever feet, and why we can go certain feet. And then that's why we start to lose that high end once we go over. Who's the musician that used like 100 feet of cable? Was that Buddy Guy?
I don't recall exactly who offhand, but I know that like the old coily cables, they used to rate them at 20 feet, and they were really like 100 foot.
Right.
And that was part of the reason why a lot of guitar players relied on them for 20 or 30 years after they stopped making them.
Right.
Was because they wanted the extra length to cut down on treble. Right. I know in television broadcast applications, they used to have whole trucks filled with cable.
Yep.
And they would use that, and basically they would find out exactly what they needed, and they would patch into different parts in the cable in order to get the signal loss or the
right.
fidelity that they needed for a given application. So.
Right. And so anyway, that's the kind of again, it's oversimplified. Somebody's going to jump in. No, Jim, that's not it. I know it. I'm oversimplifying.
There's a lot at play there, but essentially longer cables are worse, right?
Right.
You get more signal loss in longer cables.
Right.
Because that's the long and short of it.
For those who don't know what capacitance is, because capacitance, people throw that word around all the time. Oh, there's too much capacitance. Not enough capacitance. It's a capacitor. That's a capacitor. A capacitor is a simple device that what it does is, for DC voltage, it does nothing. Passes DC right. voltage. What happens is AC voltages, and depending on the picofarad or the farads of the capacitor, you are shunting AC voltage to ground. You want to do that to get rid of AC
noise.
Voltage. Right, noise.
Yeah, which comes through as noise.
Right. That's what shielding is supposed to protect our cable from.
Right. And of course, the downside of that is that it starts to get into the audible frequencies.
Correct.
That we actually want to preserve. So there's like this happy middle ground. And I think that getting back to like the idea that, people hate soldered or solderless cable. Put it in perspective, right? I'm using a soldered cable as a control in this test.
Yep.
And the soldered cable should theoretically be worse, or it should be better than the George L's, and it's not in terms of signal passing.
Here's a little known reminder for people. Every time you plug in a jack to a pedal, guess what you've done? A solderless connection. You made a solderless connection right there. When you plug the jack into the guitar, that's a solderless connection, folks.
Right.
So, just saying, you have solderless connections.
That is your weakest link in the chain.
Yeah,
if you really want to get crazy with it, that's the truth. But so here's the thing. A lot of the conversation regarding solderless cable and why it sucks, and I could use the small quotes because we're on
because we're on video
now. So the reason why it sucks,
air quotes,
okay, is because
laser.
I've heard like the live wires, right? So live wire makes a type of cable. I think it's something rail or something, and it's solid core,
right?
Okay, and everybody was buying that for a while,
yep.
right?
Yep.
So here's the problem with solid core. Solid core, if you bend it too much, it
It'll break.
breaks. And so will braided core, but it takes a lot longer, right? Because
Right.
you have these little strands and you have to break every one of them. So if you're a solid core user and you don't know any better, you go around on the internet and you tell everybody that all solderless cables are braided, right? So I did a little bit of research, actually, between now and the last time we recorded the episode, because the last time I just pointed out that George Ellis were they were not solid, right? I forget what they call it. There's a term for it, but anyway, stranded. All right, they're stranded wire. So did a little bit of research, found out that lava cable, regular old lava cable, is stranded.
Yep.
The Boss kit is stranded.
Yep.
GLS or whatever, the really expensive stuff, that's stranded.
Yep. Planet Waves is stranded. I just opened it.
Yeah, and the only solid core that I've seen is literally that lava cable, like that one monorail or whatever, lava cable. And so that's not a correct assumption to make. I mean, like that's kind of shady, right?
Yep.
The other thing is, I know people who like the George L cable so much, they don't use the ends. They solder it with real ends.
Right.
Like regular soldered ends.
Yeah.
And then use it that way. Because the cable is very, very thin.
Yes.
It's about a quarter. Here, let me see if I can compare. Obviously, you can see that this is thicker, right? This is about a quarter of the size or a third of the size of this in diameter. Yep. And it's a lot more flexible.
Yep.
And I think the advantage to the solid core that people liked was it would hold its shape. Right? But hold its shape at what price? Now, granted, you put these on a pedal board, you're not supposed to be using these. You're not supposed to be moving them around and stuff. Like they're not meant for that.
Right.
And they'll last for years. Actually, I used to use, Jim, this is where I'm going to make myself look bad. I used to have a 25-foot of this exact cable with these ends that I used to use as a regular guitar cable all the time.
Yeah.
It was the dumbest thing I'd ever done. It was the dumbest thing I'd ever done.
25 feet is a little long, but still, you could do that.
Well, yeah, no, here's the problem. So, because this stuff doesn't ever really straighten out properly, it's like you can see I'm holding it straight up and down. Yeah. It just coils so bad. Like, it was such a nightmare. Half the time I was playing it, it was all wrapped up and like knotted. And because I'm like, I'm not straightening that out.
Yeah, wire memory.
Yeah, it was a joke. But I didn't know any better, and I was like, well, okay, I can do that. I got 25 foot of this laying around, and I need a cable, so I'll make one. So, I didn't know that they actually. So George L does make an instrument cable, like a higher gauge instrument cable. I didn't know that there was a difference.
So something for the listeners to realize when you're talking about a more expensive cable versus less expensive cable, because to most people, copper's copper, so on and so forth. The cable, the purity of the copper, you mentioned that earlier. The purity of the copper is one of the things. So if the copper isn't pure enough or is less pure, that's going to be the cheaper cable. Those will be the ones that didn't, pass this test, resistance per foot, to a frequency versus this test and so on and so forth.
Right.
And that's the important thing. When you test resistance, if you just take your multimeter and you go across two, you go, oh, exactly the same. You're not testing the way that the test would be done on a bench test at a factory. Factory's going to put specific frequencies. They're going to run a band, and they'll say, okay, this frequency at this frequency at this frequency, whatever
use a spectrometer and all that,
whatever their test laid out. So they'll use a spectrometer. So the other part of it is when you look at those braids, you look at them. When you look at them personally, you go, that's just random crap, right? It's just a bunch of braided cable.
No, it's not though.
No, those braids are very specific, right down to the micrometer. I mean, those things are, when they're braided, that is what makes that cable a little better. And it kind of, when you hear the term, what is it? We used to use the term directional cable, right? There's some people that use directional.
Yeah, some people still think there's directional cable. I mean, I can't hear a difference, and I've played around with it. So.
Yeah, because the braiding, just looking at the way it works, and maybe somebody who's got a better engineering background than me, I'm thinking the braiding would still cause the cable to run the same both ways, unless there's something you're doing chemically to the copper to cause one end to be different from the other.
Well, that's what kind of gets me. So like this idea that um, there's a directional cable. So if you ever used one of these guys, this is a sun face, but the fuzz face, right?
Right.
You know that the interaction between you and the input is actually an interaction. It's
right.
Guitar signal in and then load back
right.
into my pickups, and that changes things.
Yep.
It changes the what they call the resonance or whatever of the pickup.
Right.
And so when you consider that, that's why I say directional cable. Kind of like, would you really want that?
Right, and that's where, it kind of, because we're talking about frequencies and we're going to have standing waves. That's going to be part of, it's just how much. You have a flow. The way electricity works is not, unless you had like one note that was continuous, they would never, that's not a real.
Well, specifically in DC voltage.
Yeah.
So, in AC voltage, it's a little bit different, but in DC voltage, it's definitely directional, right? Okay. It's complete the circuit in the fastest way possible.
That is correct. And AC works like a wave.
Yeah.
You're continuously moving trons in both directions.
Right.
I don't know. Again, you get down to how many trons and over how many feet and over how much time and over how much frequency. And
yeah.
And those
we're
things
not engineers. No. Fair warning, we're not engineers. No. But we can tell you from real world experience what you can expect from a higher capacitance cable versus a lower capacitance cable. And it's actually the reason why I wanted to really bring this up is I wanted to poo-poo on people who say that solderless cables suck because it's wrong. It's just wrong. Yep. It depends on the application, number one. Depends on what you want to do with it. Yeah. I think I'm going to be making the switch to soldered cable only because the guitars that I play tend to have a lot of treble content, and I'd like to curb some of it. Yep. I am primarily a fusion shred guitar player, and for me, it makes the most sense to curb some of my treble as opposed to trying to razor blade everybody's ears off when I play.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So let's say you wanted a treble bleed circuit, right? You put a treble, which the treble bleed circuit is typically a capacitor across the volume or the tone knob, right?
It actually keeps stuff from being shunted to ground when you pull the volume knob down, right?
Right. So I always thought a treble bleed circuit was to lower treble, not to raise it. But for some reason, it seems like it maintains it.
No, it's maintaining it when your volume knob rolls down.
Yeah.
So if you ever played a guitar, and I'm sure you've played guitar because you've had a lot of stuff in the vintage category too over the years.
Yeah.
If you know that when you roll the volume knob down, your treble goes down.
Yeah.
It's just part of the thing, and I think part of it's the Fletcher Munson effect.
Yeah.
But that's the idea is that it will keep the treble stable. So you can keep your clarity at lower volumes on the volume knob. Personally, I don't know that I'm actually a big fan of the treble bleed mod. I think for guitars where I've set the volume back to three notches of below 10, like 7 or whatever. I think a treble bleed might be useful. I think most of my guitars probably have it installed actually. But I've had guitars that don't. And it never even, it never fazed me. It just never even, I was never worried about it. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
Usually I used that to my advantage. So I would roll off a little bit to do just that, to take some of the treble off. And so, what's the word I want? Eddie Van Halen thought of you don't need a tone control because you just use the volume to back off the tone.
Well, and because he took the tone control out of his circuit and was running direct from volume pot to the input jack, he may not have needed it. It may have because he didn't have as much load going on his output signals. Like every time you add a control in your output path, you're going to be dumping some signal to the ground. It's just going to happen.
Yep.
And so by eliminating those controls, he may not need the treble bleed. I want to say the Wolfgangs have the treble bleed on it though.
Yeah.
That they've used that now. And part of it, so this is the context for why you might want it. say you're Steve Vai or Joe Satriani, right? You're doing your thing. Actually, Joe Satriani is a better example because he plays in a three-piece band usually. It's usually him, a bass player, and a drummer, and sometimes a keyboard player, right? And when he rolls back his volume knob, he's still the focus on stage. He still wants to cut the mix. He still wants to stand out in front. He still wants to be very well heard. So for him, having the treble bleed mod is brilliant because that means he can roll back and he can still get all the feel of it, but the audience can still hear the treble frequencies punching through. So, I mean, that's the situation. Whereas you and I, when we're accompanying somebody, so like I'm playing an old Stumpy right now, and you've played in various bands over the years, you're going to want, when you roll that volume up for the treble, to just kind of take a step back so that you can let the rest of the band fill out and kind of have your own sonic space that you occupy underneath it to accompany.
Right.
So I could see, I mean, there's definitely, I wouldn't look at it and say that it's a negative or a positive. I just think it's different tools in that case.
Yeah.
Totally different tools.
Definitely. Definitely. I think that, it always depends on you, the individual, the player. Personally, I like having a tone control. But I like a treble bleed on I'll give an example on a Stratocaster style or Telecaster style, especially. Because, again, there's that ice pick that you can get at top that if you just bring it back just a hair, it really smooths out. Yeah, there's something about rolling the tone control that sounds different. And it may be just be me. It may just be me.
I have found, so this is, I'm going to share my knowledge of single coils to you. And this is not necessarily something that everybody else is going to agree with, I'm sure. But I found that guitars that tend to have a really ice picky top, more compression, so like pushing the amp a little bit harder, and not necessarily taking back treble, but adding mids a lot of times, or increasing bass is a great way to curb that. So there's some things you might try, but generally speaking, yeah, I mean, something where you could roll the treble back would be helpful. And there are people that have built like basically what's like a Gibson Veritone circuit and a pedal that you can use to just permanently set a tone control.
Yeah.
Or set a fixed tone control sweep or whatever and just leave it running all night long.
Yep.
So, but honestly, I think that's sort of the charm of those guitars. Definitely, I think the selection of amp you use is probably the most critical thing, because I know like I've had terrible luck with certain amps and then like much better luck with other amps in terms of how ice picky something is, and even the speaker can just control how much you're going to beam somebody. But yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that can
you're
definitely.
Still using that. You're still using the. Do you have the same problem with the Twin as you do the Marshall for that?
Or no,
the ice picky.
Yeah, I've been able to calm that down. My treble. So on the Twin, I've got the treble at 5, the mids at 7, and the bass at 6.
Yeah, so you're trying to pretend it's not a blackface.
You got it. You got it.
And then on the Marshall, so both of those amps are open back though, right? I think even and that's going to help a ton.
Yep.
So that's the one thing I hear a lot of people like, oh, it just beams me really hard. Like I can't. My audience complains, and the first thing I tell them is get an open back cab.
Yep.
Because then it's not going to project as much.
Right.
And then look for a Celestion speaker as opposed to like a JBL or something like that, because those speakers tend to be more than what you're going to get out of a Celestion, which is a little bit flatter response.
Right.
But that's neither here nor there. You'd really have to test that and know what you're getting into. On either end of that spectrum. So, but yeah, so basically we're going to do some more testing. The goal here is once I get this cable all cut and soldered together, we're going to run my board on existing George L, and then we're going to do some clips, and then I'm going to do the same clips with my board with soldered cable. And I will do it both with like a clean signal, and then I'll do it with a dirty signal, and we'll turn some of the effects on and off so you can kind of get a feel of like how that all works. And then I'll probably, because I do it in every video, I'll probably turn all the effects on at some point. And then we'll compare, because I think another component of what people forget when they're wiring up a pedal board is that effects themselves do have an impact on your signal, especially if they're true bypass. Because when they're in true bypass, you're flowing this, as close as you can to like a direct signal path. But when you have it not bypassed, all of a sudden your signal's going through this like circuit,
Yep.
and whether it's well grounded and whether it's well designed, and all these other things can affect your signal quality coming out. And I wonder how much of an effect that has on capacitance and the load that your pickups see and all that, and how that's going to play into all that.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. So remember, folks, when you play a guitar, whether you're playing it straight into the amp or you're playing on the pedals, your guitar becomes part of the circuit, right? So your guitar becomes part of, if you're playing pedal board, the first pedal. That's what happens. You've got the pedal through the wire in your guitar and back around, right? So you've created a circuit right there, however short or long that is. So that's why some folks who use wireless, who refuse to use wireless, I should say, it's the reason because there's a certain something to them, to that magical path between the two. But anyway, which is why they always have the same pedal in the same spot. That first number one is always number one. Anyway, what I was getting at there is when you take just what you're talking about. So if you're in a true bypass, you've taken essentially a piece of wire, two pieces of wire, because you got the ground and the shield and the inner core. But you've taken two pieces of wire and you've shunted that through the pedal. You said, okay, you're a direct path through the pedal, not going through the circuit. And then you say, okay, I want to turn that circuit on. They redirect the signal. That's why some of the older ones would pop when they went, because they've made a physical clacking sound.
Yeah.
Which they changed in the way that they do the little micro.
They put a resistor and stuff in there to soften that.
Yep.
And that definitely plays into the amount of signal loss you get going to the thing. The other thing is now they use these like kind of faux bypass switches.
Yep.
Where they are true bypass, but they use a relay.
Yep.
And so they can set the timing of the relay to be effective for what they want to do.
Right.
That's kind of where I think the future is really. You can see Wampler and EQD, and I think EQD using it. Wampler's definitely using it.
Wampler is. He's said he has. And the reason for that clacking sound is because effectively what you've done is you've disconnected it's just as if you unplug your cable and plug it back in. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're actually hearing the sound of the foot switch clicking.
Yeah.
Which is even more hilarious. Because if you think about it, I know people who have refused to use pedals in the studio because acoustically, when you click them, you can hear them coming on, so they want to be like patched into them. It's like a whole thing. But yeah, I think it's going to be more interesting to see what the bypass situation looks like on a lot of these pedals. This is one that should click. I don't recall it clicking, but because this is like, this is basically a fuzz phase.
Right.
It should click, and I don't think it does. So I'm betting they use the resistor in there to get that from happening. But
so now some of the newer foot switches, when you click the switch, they've got like a sound dampening.
Yeah,
which is an expensive switch.
Well, it's not the switch that does it. It's a relay on the board that actually gets triggered by the switch.
Right.
So the switch is always on, and you hit it, and then it hits the relay.
Right.
Which is, that's like the oldest technology there is for doing this kind of stuff.
Right.
But I'm personally, I'm a guy that thinks that we should have buffers and everything.
Yeah.
And I think that if a well-designed buffer is probably critical to that. Yep. And I think most buffers are not well designed.
Yeah.
So let me share with you for a moment. So I got this. It's in the box, but this is a TS Mini, right? Which is like a mini version of a TS 808. The Tube Screamer buffer, in my opinion, is one of the best buffers on earth because it'll play nice with this guy, right? And this guy hates buffers. I don't care what buffer it is. He hates it. Um, and the Tube Screamer is one of the few buffers where I actually think it sort of improves the pedal in the sense that so the fuzz face, like the big thing about it is that you can roll back your volume knob like a hair and all of a sudden it's clean. And it borders on insanity. It's really difficult to get any shade of dirt in between clean and dirty. I mean, you get like mild dirt, like the mildest dirt you can possibly get, or it's full on filthy.
Right.
And there's nothing in between. And that's like literally, a millimeter of turning the knob. It's the smallest movie. You can't possibly imagine it until you've actually done it. And the Tube Screamer actually smooths that out just a hair.
Right.
Whereas other pedals, like it'll disappear completely. It's like that isn't even an effect anymore. And the other thing it does is if you use a buffer in front of a fuzz face or after a fuzz face, it does things to the treble. And the best way I can think to describe is it flattens the pedal. It loses all its dimension, and it makes it sound splatty and kind of like it is sometimes like Velcro, like ripping Velcro off.
Yep.
And you don't want that. Like the reason you use a fuzz face is to sound like Jimi Hendrix, and I don't think anybody's going to tell me that Jimi Hendrix's sound was like splatty.
No.
Maybe in certain songs, but I mean, for the most part, it's a roaring distortion sound, right? And so I've been using the Tube Screamer with it, and actually it's kind of because, again, I was talking to Mike, and he and I have been going back and forth about Eric Johnson stuff, and Eric Johnson uses a Tube Screamer into his fuzz face.
Yep.
And the interesting thing that we found was that we actually looked up the settings, and he uses his fuzz face like this. I'm gonna hold it up. The fuzz knob is like at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah, between 9 and 10, and his volume knob is like at unity.
Yep.
And then his Tube Screamer is like the drive is off the charts, and you're going, wait a minute. I thought everybody used the Tube Screamer with like very little drive.
Yeah.
But the way he's using it, he's pushing tons of mids.
Right.
And scooping off a ton of bass to drive the fuzz face.
Right.
So actually, in actuality, he's doing the same thing that metal players do, but getting a totally different sound, which is to scoop the bass off and to push up the mids, because that pedal reacts differently to it.
Right. And then
It's a cool idea.
And then he's using the fuzz face or the fuzz face to get that unity gain.
If I was going to drive a line of effects, like if I was going to make a line of effects, I think what I would do is I'd come up with a really, really good Tube Screamer circuit, maybe some sort of tunable Tube Screamer, and then I would just literally put that with like every fuzz and every distortion pedal conceivable after it.
Right.
Because I think, I'm not saying that the Tube Screamer goes with everything. I think you can get so much color out of different stuff by running a Tube Screamer in front of it, just because it is geared to provide the correct frequencies to punch through a mix. That's why they're so popular. That's why every third overdrive effect is the Tube Screamer, with some mods on it, like that. There's a reason for that, and you can accomplish much of the same thing with like a Boss GE7 by boosting mids, and cutting bass. So, yeah, that's my impression. But the reason I started to talk about this is the buffer. I think this buffer is very, very transparent. I know people will argue with me that audiophiles will be like, that's not transparent. But it's transparent in the sense that it doesn't do things to your signal that cause it to not place nice with other effects. Boss buffers are pretty good. But in my opinion, Boss buffers still mess with things like vintage fuzz. So I still I err on the side of caution. If I'm going to use some sort of vintage fuzz pedal on a board, then I bring out the Kingmaker, because I want to use, that way everything plays nice. And I know a lot of people are like, well, you just got to use what's really good. Listen, Jim, you were talking about doing the thing where, I think it was you that were talking about building a board. No, somebody else. Told me they're going to build a board and they're going to use all of the best effect for each type. They're just going to do a bunch of research and find what they think is the best, and that's what they're going to get, and spare no expense on price. And I was kind of laughing because I'm like, well, you can do that, but I don't think anything's going to play well.
Right.
Like, they're not going to play nice together.
Right.
That's
like saying you're going to take the Kardashians and put them in a playground with Trump kids, and they're all going to play nice together.
Yeah. I think, wow. I think growing up and like, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, because I didn't grow up in the last 4 or 5 years. I'm 35 years old, but I think in the last 4 or 5 years when I had this like pedal awakening, I started buying all these pedals. I think that I thought if I get the good stuff, obviously that'll work well with the other good stuff,
Right.
and then I'll have this great board. And I had lots of good stuff, but what I found out was none of it worked well together. And there's a reason for that. Because if you want the best in breed of something, you have to build around it. You have to pick what you want and build around it. And pedal boards are like, people don't see them as the modular system that they are. They think that, oh, well, it's got a 1/4 inch jack. You know, that's what I want to use into the next 1/4 inch jack. And that's just simply not the case.
I think that's what Boss does well. And that is, if you use Boss pedals with Boss pedals, that's what Boss does.
Absolutely. And I think you'll find that with a lot of the brands, that their pedals work well within the brand, but once you get beyond the brand.
But I think that's why guys like JHS, Josh Scott, and Wobbler, and those folks, they have a ton of different pedals, is because they're constantly, okay, how is it going to work with this amp? How's it going to work with this pedal? How's it going to work with this kind of guitar? And so they're constantly doing research to figure out, okay, because even Josh Scott will tell you, there are times when he'll say, yep, no, my pedal is not the best one for that. I don't have a good pedal for that application. You're better off going to Mike, who builds the Sunface, Mike.
Analog Man.
Analog Man.
Mike Analog Man Pira.
Yeah, Mike Pira. Or, he'll say go to Wamp, or he'll say go to Keeley,
And those dudes are all friends, so they're going to point you in the right direction. They'd rather you be happy than to buy their product.
Right, because it's not enough money for them to make you unhappy because you grabbed their product over somebody else's, because they were able to make $30, $40 off of you. Or whatever.
And actually, as of all those people that I've met over the years, they all worship each other in the sense that, like, if somebody builds a really cool pedal, they've all got it.
Right.
And they're all talking about how good it is. And there's no, like, I wish I'd have built that. It's not like that at all. It's very much like, yeah, this is cool, and I'm glad you made this.
There was
an area of expertise kind of thing.
There's an Andertons video where they've got the D&M drive, and then they've got the new Snake something drive, Snake Oil or whatever it is, and then they're doing this, and you're like, oh, and he knocks it off. Says, oh, I'm in the middle.
So I kind of want to get a D&M drive just so I can put the words pretentious all over it.
Yeah.
It'll be the most pretentious drive pedal ever.
I can't see me getting it. Not because I don't think it's a good pedal. I don't know it from Adam. I don't really care. I've got the 50/50 coming now. I'm going to have enough pedals.
You do. I'm going to put it in the mail. I bet I was looking for it today so I could put it in the mail for you. I was hoping to get it out today.
Then I can pay you.
I'd like to order my King of Tone. That would be nice. That's the goal. So King of Tone's coming. And that's a whole other conversation. I got to play around with the King of Tone and Helix, and because I have Helix Native, and that's definitely kind of where I want to go. It's somewhere between the way I would characterize it is somewhere between a Tube Screamer and a like a blues driver, and it's kind of like more Marshall flavored. But I will say, I guess that I don't know that it's going to be the end of my dirt journey. I'm probably going to hang on to my Tube Screamer, just at least in the beginning, because I still need something to go with this guy, which is my 7-string Kiesel.
Yep.
For the low B, like I don't think a King of Tone is going to drop enough bass, so I need to make sure that I can curb some more. So I'll keep the Tube Screamer around, but I don't know that it's going to have a permanent place on the board or anything like that.
So I got to ask, when you think about it, is there really an end to a dirt journey?
No.
I just don't think there is.
I think for most folks there isn't. I mean, it just depends. I think that journey ends when you find the right amp. To be completely honest, it's not a pedal journey. Yeah. I think of having flavors of dirt is like having options.
Right.
So and actually, I'm not looking at the King of Tone as an overdrive pedal so much as a booster. And I want to hit my amp in different ways.
Yeah.
I could definitely see, and I'm laughing because Like I'm becoming more increasingly aware. I've been listening to Nick Johnston a lot lately. I'm sure I've mentioned it on the show already.
Nick Jonas?
Nick Johnston.
Oh, okay.
Not the guy that plays for Schecter Guitars, right? And plays for himself. Not Nick Jonas, the guy that plays for money and lots of it. Nick Johnston has, of course, the Schecter Strat, right? Which is a Wenge neck, 3 single coils, pretty straight up Strat affair. Maybe I think it's got stainless steel frets on it. And I think it's he's got a Goto 510 or something like on there. But I would characterize it as kind of like a circular. And the whole idea is that he plays this music that's like outrageous gent fusion kind of like metal hybrid thing, right?
Right.
And I really hate to use the word gent to describe him, but I know that he gets lumped in a lot with those guys. And I was kind of like, when I first heard him, I was like, oh, hey, had a look at that. And I just kind of wrote him off. But now that I've listened to him more and more, and like I'm starting to get into his music more, I'm kind of realizing that I sound a lot like him in my gear selection and kind of where my tone is. And it's because I use Strats into Mark V's, Mesa Boogies, which he does.
Yep.
You remember, Jim, when I went to GearFest last year, I was talking about buying a PRS MT15, the Mark Tremonti amp.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I saw a video the other day of Nick Johnston playing through an MT15. And I kind of went, yeah, I like that sound. Yeah. I was just sitting there thinking, like, I wonder why.
Did you think to yourself, why does this guy keep copying me?
He uses the Precision Drive from Horizon, which is Misha Mansour's MXR based company. And I was thinking about buying a Precision Drive, and now I'm actually like looking at his board, and I'm like, this is pretty good ideas here. Because I'm already going down this path. Like, why not? At this point, why not?
Yeah.
No, so I actually come more from the Robin Trower side of where Nick Johnston is, but I definitely see a lot of similarities between what he does and what I've been doing. And the funny part is I started doing it like in a vacuum. I didn't know about him.
Right.
I didn't find out about him till way later.
Yeah.
Because I'm descended from, Jimi Hendrix and that kind of stuff, and Yngwie and Ritchie Blackmore. Like, that's what. So then I start seeing, this guy, and I'm like, hey, he sounds a lot like me. And I'm kind of thinking, like, yeah, he's kind of descended from those same dudes. Like, what the hell? It just so happens,
Yeah.
We don't play anything alike. Obviously, Nick Johnston's a way better player than I am, but
right.
I someday would like to play like that.
I'm just kidding. I say the same thing. I've been, when I talk to my instructor, he says, Jim, stop putting yourself down. You're a good player. And I go, no, I'm not. But I always strive to do better. And I look at what somebody else is doing. And at some point, like I'm 56 years old. Well, I'll be 56 years old when we record the next podcast. And so, I have to realize that I'm going to be me for the rest of my life. I've been me my whole life, and I'm going to be me.
It ain't going to change.
It's not going to change now, folks. And so some of you may have found a way to be someone else, but I take pride in the fact that I'm me, and I take a little issue in the fact that I'm me. But I have to realize that I'm just me. I mean, that's all there is to it.
Thinking about this conversation, like I don't really feel like I put myself down so much as every time I pick up the guitar and I learn to do something new, I think this is the greatest thing I've done. And the fact is I'm 35 years old and I'm still going, this is the greatest thing I've done. Like almost every other time I pick up the guitar.
Right.
And to an extent, that's where you start to realize like there's always so much room to grow that it's very easy to not be okay with yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I don't feel like I'm not okay with myself. I just feel like I have room to grow. I know where I need to grow, and I hope I can do it quickly enough to make a run of it. Because I don't want to be like, 10 years from now looking back at what I've been doing for the last 10 years and go, God, I really haven't done anything.
Right.
Which actually happened to me recently. So I was listening to recordings I made when I was in high school in like my first year of college. And I was like, wow, that still sounds like me. And it was kind of like, you'd think I'd change. My sound would be different. You know, like you'd think I would have figured things out or like whatever. The only thing that was different was the recording quality. That's pretty much it. Well, I say that, but obviously I'm a better player now. But the stylistic choices I was making were very similar. Um, the overall tonality that I was going for is still pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Which I love it or hate it. I mean that's obviously like personal preference thing, and I don't particularly love my tone. Like I don't think I've ever had a moment where I've just been like, man, I love the way I sound right now.
Yeah.
But I tend to have that a lot
Me.
with other people. Like I could hear somebody else and be like, but I think it's just because I get stuck on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed one thing that's better, that has always improved, and that's my rhythm. I'm better at locking in. I'm better at finding that weird spot where a ghost note belongs or whatever, um,
Right.
than I was before. Although, as age has crept up on me, there's a couple of things that I'm starting to slip on. Like I'll forget stuff. Um, and it's not like a bad forget, like I've forgotten how to tie my shoes or something, but I'll forget, like, what the heck chord was that? Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to do. But I can figure it out by ear most of the time, but it's become a little bit of a thorn in the side. But I think that we grow as individuals, and sometimes I'll go, you know what? I thought that was that, but I think maybe that might be two guitars playing two different chords, or panned left and right. And so I always thought I was playing it right, and then I was like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this, and I can't get it right, no matter which side I'm listening to. I'm I'm playing it differently. So sometimes I find that. Um, I was listening to a song, I can't remember. Oh, it was "Overjoyed" by Stevie Wonder. Love the song. It's got these. He modulates in that song so many times it would drive you bananas if you tried to chart it. And he has this vocal run he does, and the only reason I'm talking about it is because this girl on The Voice sang it. And if you listen to Stevie, he sings "Every Time I Love," so he has this thing that sounds like it's ascending the whole time, but he actually does like a pentatonic run, like you're going to do up and down, up and down, up and down. And she did it like a chromatic run. So instead of da 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 da, she went da 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 da, and it just, and I went, now I know what's wrong with that. Not with what he did, but what.
I mean, the chromatic run is harder.
Yeah.
But
Especially to shove that many notes in that chromatic run that only goes 5 notes.
well, I was watching somebody play the Black Page this morning.
Uh-huh.
And are you familiar with that piece of music or not?
Yeah.
Okay. I still don't understand like the rhythmic notation for that, where there's things in there that are like 11 tuplets. It's like 11 notes jammed into into one beat, and it's like, what? Like, how do you even? I mean, that's like alien music. Like, who writes that?
Yeah.
And the whole point, of course, obviously, the whole point of that was like Frank Zappa was kind of joking with his band and was like, "Here, I'll bet none of you guys can play this." And he came up with this piece and he just handed it to him, and then Terry Bozzio went off and actually learned it. And I'm sure Frank was just as surprised as everybody else that they could figure it out. But I'm sure also it was like notated goofily. It's like so it's like when you paraphrase something. When you write music, there are often ways for you to do the same thing with like what I would consider to be poor notation. It wouldn't be the regular way to write it, but like it would accomplish the same thing. Kind of like a homonym, right? A word that sounds the same, but or that kind of thing. And I get the feeling that that's what's going on in the Black Page is like he found a novel way to notate a few things that makes it really, really difficult. In addition to the fact that it's just a technically insane piece of music to play to begin with. But yeah, it's like that. It's just complicated for the sake of being complicated to throw in a chromatic run in a piece of music, and a piece of vocal music, no less.
yeah, in a piece of vocal, and I thought to myself, why would you make that so difficult on yourself as to make it so that you can't like, and then it doesn't quite it didn't quite grab the ear to so a modulation. For those who don't know, it's a key change, right?
I don't even think
So
I
you're
would not even consider that a modulation. I think that would just be like all grace notes. That's kind of the way I would think of that.
well, no, he graces into he modulates he slowly modulates like up a half step, then up a half step, then up a half. The whole song modulates all the way through. I want to say there's like 4 or 5 modulations.
And that is that Stevie Wonder that did that?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, so he wrote
Back
it
when he
that
was
way.
young.
I
Yeah,
thought
back when he
this
was
we were
young.
saying the performer decided to.
Oh no, he wrote it that way.
But which song are we
And
talking
so
about? I missed that.
overjoyed,
Okay.
overjoyed.
Yeah.
I've been yeah, da, 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 da. And so he he's doing this, when he plays it and he sings it, um, he goes, every time I da 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 da, and then he comes back down, and then he goes, and then he goes up again. But the next time he just goes one more half step. I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to take it one more syllable. That's going to pull your ear to this new place that I'm going to be. And it's just it's mystical in that you just don't notice it till you hear it. But if somebody does it chromatically, it just kind of slaps you in the face. Like, all right, I just went into this new spot, and you don't get to feel like you're still in the song, because the song is supposed to feel joy. The song is about, and then you lose the meaning of the song. Sometimes it's like what Rick Beato talks about. A song is written and performed in a way because that's how it pulls you in. I think we've talked about that before,
Yeah,
right?
I think we've had discussions about it. And while I tend to agree with that, I think audience plays a key part in that, and the level of interpretation that goes on from the audience.
Yep.
Because obviously, like songs that are written with a broad audience, right? So let's think about praise and worship, right? So the whole
Right.
idea that you're going to go into a praise and worship setting, you're typically going to find songs that are easy to sing, that you can predict where the melody's going to go, and all this different stuff, because that's their intended audience, right?
Right.
But if you're going to listen to like I'm trying to think like bebop jazz or something, you're
Right.
not going to predict where that's going to go. You're
Nope.
not going to be able to hum that melody before you've heard the whole thing, you know? And I think that's sort of the charm of that music. And I think the people that are like have the ear for that have developed it. And I think that they look for different stuff in the music that attracts them. And so, yeah, absolutely. Like, and I've had this commentary with people in the group before too. It's like melody and harmony are critical components to composing music, but they're not always the most critical. It just depends on the audience you're speaking to.
That okay, I agree with you there. But when you're talking about pop music, you're going
Right.
towards a
But that's a
generic.
specific genre, and you've got a wide audience.
Right.
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 And I think that's
Universality.
where, yeah, I think that's why some people get Pink Floyd and some people don't.
Well, I don't see Pink Floyd as being like way beyond the realm of like normal pop sensibility with like harmony and that kind of thing. When you start getting into bands that are dabbling with like dissonance or dwelling in dissonance, and a
King
perfect example
Crimson.
is like taking King Crimson is a good example, but that's a little progressive. Like that's kind of its own jam, right?
Yeah.
Um, but you're talking about Stevie Wonder, and he's
Yep.
a perfect example because he does definitely have music that like borders on atonal at times.
Right.
Um, "You Ain't Done Nothing" is one of the songs that I think about. That is like it definitely has it's like damn near tone clusters in it. Um,
Yeah.
where I think that speaks to a broad audience because he uses groove and he uses um, motifs and devices that work sensibly, but he can sprinkle in this ugly stuff in there too, and gets away
Right.
with it. But he's a master composer, which is why it was interesting. We started out talking about Stevie Wonder because everything he does has this like, especially the later stuff, um, has this like element of avant-garde jazz that's like below the surface, just lurking there. It's like the alligator underneath the water. You're just waiting for its jaws to come
Yeah.
out and just rip you a new one. But
Yeah.
remember he's written songs for everybody too,
Oh yeah.
and was selling songs to people like Jeff Beck. I mean, because we've ended as lovers, and any of our our guitar virtuoso catalog. Remember that song was written by Stevie Wonder.
Stevie Wonder. Yeah.
Yeah,
On a keyboard, not
right,
on a guitar, folks.
right.
Um, and probably my favorite, and a lot of people's favorite Stevie Wonder song that has a lot of really sneaky stuff in it, Sir Duke.
Yeah, no, that's another great one. Actually, that was the other one I was
Yeah.
thinking of. Phew. Yeah, the chord changes in that are
Yeah.
psycho. They and Steely Dan is another great example of a band that can get away with this stuff too,
Oh yeah.
where
Yeah.
they
Steely Dan.
like
Yeah.
think about Deacon Blues
Oh
and the
yeah.
chord progression that like the sneaky stuff in there, and then they put a G major 13 I think in Kid Charlemagne, which is
Yeah.
like who puts a G major 13 in pop music?
Yeah. If you listen to the vocal, so there's a vocal harmony there that's going on in Kid Charlemagne.
Oh
That's
yeah,
just that's yeah. That's
it's from
incredible.
another planet. It's from another planet. It's like
It shouldn't.
this
It
shouldn't have
wouldn't
been written
work.
by humans. Like
Yeah.
there's no way. Um,
Yeah, it wouldn't work otherwise. And how they found a popular following. I mean, you could not turn on a radio at that time without hearing FM, Black Friday, Kid Charlemagne. I mean,
Deacon
those
Blues.
songs, Deacon Blues. I don't think that they wrote those with like, oh, you know what? We're going to make a hit.
No,
Deacon,
no.
you know,
It was that was incidental. That was like when they realized it's almost like they did the first record and then it was sort of successful because it wasn't super successful.
right.
That they were kind of like, oh, well, we can make a run of this. Like people are actually interested in this like music that we want to make. And so then they start making stuff that just sort of like gets more and more successful. And the funnier part about it is the more successful they get, the farther off the reservation they went. I mean, you think about like Katie Lied and even the Royal Scam, which has some of the like the jazz stuff on it. That was the first one I think they did with the full session band really. All the way out to Gaucho, which is actually the second time
Oh,
that
yeah.
album was made. They made that album twice because
Twice, yep.
they destroyed the first copy on accident.
Yep. They didn't like it or
Um,
something. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, they actually. I think they ended up recording over it or something. There was some, or the band that came. No, they left the recordings in the studio, and the band that came after them actually recorded over their masters.
That's right.
And so they just said no, and they actually went back and re-recorded the record, and it actually destroyed them. They couldn't get along together, and that was the end of Steely Dan
Yep.
for a long time.
That yeah. So Don't Take Me Alive. That's another
Yep.
one that's got some weird stuff. I used to play that in a band. We covered that song. People loved it.
Yeah,
But let me tell you
that's
something.
a good song. Yeah, it is.
That's
The Pool Boy.
and I sang and played that. I can tell you right now. there
That's
was
the one that's about the
nothing-
pool boy, right? If
Yeah.
I recall. Yeah, that record's great. That's off Royal Scam
Yep.
for sure.
That's off the Royal Scam. Yep.
Caves of Altamira is on there, and trying to think what
Yep.
other songs are on there that are really good.
I was just looking up their list and I'm like, holy crap! It was so many big. Josie, Babylon Sisters.
Yeah.
That's another one that's got a vocal harmony that's just, that Babylon Sisters,
Yep.
shake it. That whole thing.
Yeah, and
You
they've
listen
arranged
to
the
the harp-
vocals almost like a horn section. Yeah.
Yeah. Who was contemporary of that was doing a lot of that weird stuff that was the guys from Alan Parsons Project was doing a lot of weird stuff like that.
Sure.
They were really going out there.
But I think that's because they came from sort of the progressive direction, right? Like they were
Yeah.
coming back towards pop music, and I kind of feel like Steely Dan went the opposite direction.
Opposite direction.
Yeah, it was like they were already tuned into jazz, but they were writing pop music, and then they slowly started to get more and more jazz oriented. And it was funny because when they did come back in the '90s, like they went right back to their roots, which is the funny part. It's like they had to start over.
Yeah, well, you take. I was talking about the Alan Parsons Project. You take the song that is what is it called? Sirius. That opens just about every basketball game that
Yeah.
you've ever been to, right? And I know the LA Lakers use it. And that goes into Eye in the Sky. But if you take the song Games People Play, um, that's got harmonies and stuff that just blow your mind. Early ELO before the Discovery album and the whole disco thing was another band that really took it out there. But something happened to the guy that was the real, because everybody thinks it was Jeff Lynne, and there was I can't remember. I think it was the cellist that was the real brains behind the outfit that was really writing the crazy, weird stuff that they did in the beginning.
It's funny.
Excuse me.
So if you take a step back, like in the '60s, there was all forms of music were valid, right?
Right.
So for example, like at Woodstock, you had Sha Na Na, which we've talked about
Right.
them before on the show.
Yeah.
You had
Yeah.
Sha Na Na on stage with like Carlos Santana and Jimi Hendrix and
Country Joe and the Fish.
Country Joe and the Fish. I don't think did the Grateful Dead actually perform at Woodstock, or did they not get there?
I thought they did.
They may have. I don't remember. I'd have to go look it up. But anyway,
I know they were there.
But the whole point is like you have this variety of bands, right? And these guys were all big at the time, or became big because of Woodstock, like after the fact. And you compare and contrast that with as little as 15 years later, not even 15, like late 70s, right? When disco was the thing. And it's really kind of shocking that you went from bands like Yes, Genesis, what's the other one? Gentle Giant, with these like progressive bands to like ELO. Because that was really this is the art rock music that existed at that time. And then it just kind of shrunk down to this like narrow hole until Rush, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of those bands, ELO was an example. Another example was Chicago Transit Authority, which became Chicago. In the beginning, those first two albums, Chicago was incredible. Their music was just great. And then they put out, what was that? Don't Hurt Me or whatever that was.
And then Peter Cetera happened.
Well, Peter Cetera, I mean, he was the high voice behind that thing the whole time. The problem was, as soon as they let him not have to play bass all the time, that's when they took it away. And good Lord help us.
Well, I mean, they had no choice. They did lose.
Hard to Say I'm Sorry. That's the one.
Yeah.
It's hard to say I'm sorry. Oh God, no, stop.
But
stop.
No, so they, and Chicago's close to my heart. Obviously, I live in the Chicagoland area, so everybody likes Chicago here. I don't think I've ever run into somebody who's like, I hate Chicago.
Well, at that time, you still had there was still a real jazz and big band presence.
Well,
so
I think for Chicago though, like the interesting thing about them was they were fusing psychedelic music with that.
Right. Yeah, they were fusing psychedelic, jazz, funk, and of course rock.
Yeah, and pop. I would say everything they did was basically around a pop framework, like the idea that they were going to sell these songs too.
25 or 624, that type of thing, definitely. But you take, just to put things in perspective, you could sit on any given weeknight and you would have either Hee Haw, which was country, you would have Lawrence Welk, you would have the American Bandstand, which was pop, right? Lawrence Welk was big band. You had jazz. There was still any of the whether you were watching Donnie and Marie or Sonny and Cher or any of these other shows, they had all of these people on, and so there was still a mixture. So our sensibilities as a country and as a whole was still all over the place. And I think if I remember right, the guys that created Hee Haw were actually kind of doing a joke on like Lawrence Welk or that kind of thing.
Sounds legit.
Yes, like it was supposed to be satirical and it wound up being a big hit. But the point that I'm making is that if you were growing up, like you were born when, 86, 85?
I was born in 84.
84. Jeez. 80.
Jim, I was 3 years old and I saw Air Supply.
Yeah, yeah. I was 23. Anyway, so when when you're sitting out there and you're able to absorb all that kind of music, it's all there because your mom and dad have they have a who's that guy, Dean Martin album, or they have a Sammy Davis Jr. album, and they have Frank Sinatra music, so on and so forth. You had that kind of thing because your parents were a little older, right?
I had country music, and that was all. I like, honestly, I did the few records I got when I was like 15 or 16 years old from them. They were like vinyl because they had this big stack of vinyl records, right? But we never listened to any of it. We never went through any of it. And then we were starting to go through it, and I found a Cream record, and I found there were some other things, but basically like the one Cream record in that collection was the one that kind of surprised me because almost everything else was either Beatles or it was I think there was Whiter Shade of Pale was in there. The Procol Harum record. Which my dad had worn that record out more than once. And then they listened to a lot of like film soundtracks, and they had a lot of country music. Which my mom was big into country western. I don't think my dad really just didn't have that many records. Most of the stuff he listened to was like early 60s pop music, Paul Revere and the Raiders and stuff like that, which I never really got the exposure to because he was always listening to oldies radios. Like, it just never really happened. And later on, as I started getting into music, a lot of the bands that I listened to were like bands that were probably popular when they were growing up. They just just completely missed. And it was funny because like they were discovering these bands at the same time I was.
Yeah, when you were
yeah, so it's like, wait, you mean that's Led Zeppelin? Like, yeah, Dad, you were alive when this band was popular. Like, what the hell? That's what was going on. It's literally what was going on.
I thought it was all Stairway to Heaven.
I remember. Okay, so here's a classic example, right? I got the Rock and Rio DVD from Iron Maiden, and I was watching upstairs, and my dad comes up and he like sits down. And he's like, "Who's this?" And I'm like, "This is Iron Maiden." He's like, "That's Iron Maiden." I'm like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Man," he's like, "That sounds really cool." And I looked at him and I was like, "You were alive when this band was really popular." I'm like, "They're still popular now, but," and he's like, "Yeah," but he's like, "I wouldn't have listened to them." And it just like kind of dawned on me. I'm like, wow, you sheltered yourself really bad. Like, this is ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was lucky enough that my parents had both Dolly Parton and the Beatles and, Elvis, but they also had Eric Clapton and Cream.
I got my fair share of Elvis. I mean, I just didn't get any I didn't get the Doors. I got Cream, the one record. I didn't get hardly anything else out of them, which just it was all like vicariously through. My brother had a couple of records that I was really interested in as a kid, mostly the ones that were like all about drugs that made me laugh because I was like, drugs are bad,
drugs are bad.
Obviously I don't do drugs now, but I would laugh because I would be like, oh, what are they singing about? We'd be listening to like Jefferson Airplane or something. It's like the White Rabbit, and he's like,
yeah, one pill makes you larger.
Yeah, he's like, well, they're singing about drugs, and I'm like, oh, all right, this is funny because like it just seems ridiculous to me, but so I got into all that stuff, and when I first got my guitar, like then I started seeking out that music. I went and bought Doors records. I bought Surrealistic Pillow. I bought and I was getting all this stuff used, like I was going to used stores and buying it. And Jimi Hendrix and all that stuff. And I actually, the first recording of this episode, we talked about that, was that even that music, like I was exposed to other people my age who were listening to that music, which was crazy to me. Like I'd go and I'd be talking to somebody in the hall and I forget who it was, but he was listening to a CD player. And I asked him, I said, who are you listening to? He's like, Jimmy. I'm like, Jimmy who? And he's like, Hendrix. And I looked at him and I was like, oh, all right, I need to go home and get that record. And like I literally went home and I got the record. Like I went and I bought it. And I already knew Jimi Hendrix, but I'd never listened to the record like as a whole context. And that was part of like me becoming an informed musician. I kind of exhausted the stuff that I could play easily, and then I started getting interested in like what had come before that was not easy, right? That people had a good reputation for, and so I discovered like Pink Floyd, and I would turn my nose up at bands like that when I first got into school. I was like, why are you interested in something that happened like 50 years ago in the context of music? I mean, I get history, like I'm a history buff, but
oh yeah, I'm just saying.
Now it's all different, right? Like I have a totally different outlook. Being a musician
I'll be honest with you. So the first time I heard Pink Floyd, it was I want to say it was "Wish You Were Here" metal, I think, but no, it would have been Dark Side of the Moon, and then my aunt says, "Oh, you like Pink Floyd? Listen to this," and she pulled out "Saucer Full of Secrets."
Oh yeah, right. Naturally.
Went, what the hell is that?
Yeah, naturally, because you're like, what?
I was like, I've got a bike, you can ride it if you'd like. It's got a basket, a bell, and rings and things that make it look good. What's that?
Arnold Lang and stuff like that.
Yeah, Arnold Lang had a strange, or Eugene, be careful with that axe.
I've still been trying to figure out like how they got some of those guitar sounds on that record.
All right, and that's all on a Telecaster.
Yeah, it's like a Telecaster
like
through
a Fender Twin.
Yeah, like a cranked up Fender Twin. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
But not one that's like pushed to the brink like Johnny Winter style. One that's like on the verge of like farting out and exploding. It's like weird sound. That's a great
she showed me Saucer Full of Secrets and Piper is at the Gates of Dawn. And I was like, what in the holy heck is this? It was definitely not the Pink Floyd I knew that was doing money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of bands like that. So like, I'm a big Genesis fan, and their first record, which has been reprinted, is like piano and vocal.
Yeah.
And like very little drums. It's called From Genesis to Revelation, and it's literally a retelling of the Bible. And it is the weirdest record in context with even the next record they put out, which is like full rock band, with the knife and stuff on it. And I just remember like when I got From Genesis, because I was collecting. I have literally every Genesis CD. I think at one point, I don't have them all now, but at one point I had every Genesis CD that had been printed in U.S. and foreign markets. So I had like a binder of like 200 CDs that was literally just all like, and a lot of it was duplicates. It was the same thing, but it was like a different master or whatever.
Right.
And I remember when I got that record, I got 3 different copies of it, and I remember thinking like, there's got to be a different version of it that sounds more like the band. And then just kept listening and being like, what the hell? Like, this is weird. And that's the same thing that you probably experienced when you heard that, Saucer Full of Secrets or whatever. And you're like, what?
And then there's a song called Jug Band Blues on Saucer Full of Secrets. And I went, what in the holy heck? So when you listen to Pipers at the Gates of Dawn, the first song on there is See Emily Play.
Yep.
And it's the weirdest tune.
Sounds like a helicopter in the beginning, right? If I recall.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, this is supposed to be a nice, lighthearted tone, and it's not a lighthearted song.
They were really like, how do you put it? For that time, they were like a mod band, very much so, like hard British rock. And I would say that they even like bordered on bands like The Who for like the noise factor and just the aggressiveness. And then very quickly they became like a very thinking man's music,
right?
Which is a kind of like diametric opposition, which is why I think that's so jarring for a band like that. But we've seen other bands do that. Think about Judas Priest.
Oh yeah,
Judas Priest's early days when they were like basically hippies.
Yeah.
Versus like Hellbent for Leather. Motorcycles, giant Marshall stacks, guys in spikes and leather.
Guys in spikes and leather. And and it's always been one of the hilarious things when Rob Halford came out of the closet. He goes, what? You couldn't tell?
Yeah, like I know, right? That's like in retrospect, it's like the most obvious thing in the world.
He goes,
but
look at the outfits.
nobody realized it.
Yeah.
Everybody was like,
It
I
was,
thought it just was like a thing you picked for the music. No, he knew where to get all this stuff.
and,
Like,
and every teenage kid, I remember, I was one of them, going to those shows was dressing like that.
yeah, they had
We
like
had
the wristbands and like the,
Yep,
yeah.
the wristbands with the things on. I mean, come on, Kerry King turned it into nails coming out of his wristbands. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I think there is definitely something to be said about the fact that the culture didn't care. You know what I mean? The same kids that sat down and listened to Judas Priest were listening to Art Garfunkel, and they were listening to the Brothers Johnson.
Yeah.
And so well, Simon and Garfunkel, but and Pink Floyd and stuff like that. So there was very little of that. Oh, I hate this kind of music. I hate that kind of music. There's definitely a change there, but yeah, I do miss that. We're gonna try to do. I was talking to Dan Kish. We're gonna try to do some listening parties. So people that want to get in on it, we're gonna start doing that, and we'll start exposing each other and the group to some music that we otherwise wouldn't hear. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm looking to see if I can find some young Judas Priest pictures to show on the video here.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because there's an old live performance.
Unleashed in the East.
Is that what it is?
Yep, the album was Unleashed in the East.
When was that?
Look at the cover. Look at the cover of Unleashed in the East. That's all you need to see.
Oh no, that's later when they're in the leather. I'm talking about before.
Oh, you're
that.
talking about before that.
When
okay.
he was
I was
like,
going to say that
one of the guys was wearing like the big.
leather.
I think it was like Glenn Tipton or somebody was wearing like the big farmer hat with a big thing of straw sticking out of his mouth, and I'm going, this isn't Judas Priest. Like, what the hell is this?
He's wearing jeans.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got to go before that. Unleashed in the East is probably my favorite Judas Priest album of all time. That's got the Green Manalishi. That's got all the good stuff on it. Definitely the rockin' version of Diamonds and Rust.
Yeah.
I'll be damned. Oh, that's a killer song. And what's funny is they took a Joan Baez song, but that's the first time he rode out on the motorcycle. Well, that first tour where he took the motorcycle out on tour.
This should work for us. Let me see if I can get the right screen to show up here. Bear with me. That one right there. It looks like I see this band and I think, is that Judas Priest or is that like Peter Frampton's band?
Yeah.
like that's kind of what I like. What? Wait, what? There's an even better one up in the corner here. Like KK Downing is apparently in this photo. Like I couldn't even recognize him at that point. But yeah, it doesn't get more 70s with the green background and all of that. Like, it's very, very funny. And Rob Halford,
Oh, when they're playing in San Antonio.
Yeah. Oh, I you can't see that. I keep forgetting that I've got OBS and you can't see it. Yeah, that's okay.
I'm looking at a photo of him playing in San Antonio, and holy God, this is hilarious. KK Downing's got his signature blonde hair and flying V, and he's got just a wild shirt on with big red pants and high white boots on.
Does he have the big hat?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm trying to pull up. There's another photo that I found somewhere else that I'll share in the video if I can. No, apparently it's not big enough. It's like a thumbnail, but they got the big hat in that photo. I really wanted to show it, but whatever. Yeah, it was like farmer hat, They were still trying to find their style. They just didn't know what they were going to look like, and they knew that they had to be different, and so they were exploring the fashion stuff of it, and they settled on the leathers and chains and stuff, which is crazy to me because I think they actually thought it was like motorcycle aesthetic.
Yep.
And I mean, yeah, motorcycle riders wear leather, but it's not bondage gear. I mean, I've never seen a motorcycle rider with like polished leather,
Yeah,
where it's like
no.
like a mirror finish. That's totally like gimp outfit there. That's like Pulp Fiction guy stored in a box kind of
Well,
stuff.
that kind of reminds me. Have you ever seen that first video of Black Sabbath for Iron Man? It's just like this acid trip video.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that stuff
And
was like the old gray whistle test, and like
yep,
that one probably would have been Beat Club,
yeah.
and
And so
that's
Ozzy's just standing there at the microphone,
with the crazy
just
psychedelic
pushing the hair.
background. Yeah, this crazy psychedelic backdrop.
He's just constantly pulling his hair out of his
Yeah, well, I
face.
mean, what
The
else are
only
you gonna
move
do
he's
with hair
got.
as long as stick straight hair and it's like 3 feet long?
uh,
Yours is not 3 feet long, Jim.
Mine isn't 3 feet long again yet, but yeah, yeah. He's got that. He's got that hair going on. It's just so funny to watch him, and you know, it,
He will be missed when he finally passes.
yeah. It's gonna. It's
Not that
not gonna be
anybody's
long.
waiting for him to pass, but
I don't have high hopes for him. He's. I know he just did that
he's
album,
got a
but it
lot
was
of
kind of a
health.
swan song.
He's got a lot of health problems. He's and I'm not gonna speak about like I don't know actually his health situation, but it would appear to me that he has a lot of health problems. He's suffered with addiction for years and has done horrible things to his body.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine somebody like that soldiering on forever. Hopefully, he gets to stick around as long as as long as God allows.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would not shock me to wake up tomorrow and hear that Ozzy's passed because he's like I said, no one has abused their body quite the way that some of those guys in the '70s did,
Oh
and
yeah,
he is
Ozzy.
probably one of the top for abuse.
People joke around about Keith Richards, but come on, Eric Clapton was just self-destructive.
I would love
We
to
were
see Ozzy and Keith Richards square off in a ring.
that would be hilarious. Those
They
two
could
old
both break
guys.
their arms off and beat each other to death with them.
They they'd just have tea
Yeah, they probably would.
and talk shit. I
Maybe
mean,
do some
that's
coke.
what they would do. Yep, that would be the thing. So we talked about that. One of the things that we talked about that let's go back to guitar here, tone and stuff. So speaking of Clapton, we talked about Clapton, Cream, and all that stuff.
Sure.
Um, because I think, oh yeah, we were talking about what was the first riff you really learned.
What did I
Remember?
say it was? I don't remember because now I'm like thinking about it and I don't remember what it was.
Because I had mentioned like Clapton and Cream and that.
I think the first riff I learned was Iron Man. It was Iron Man.
Iron Man.
Yeah, it was Iron Man. And Jim's gonna play his first riff for us, I'm sure.
No, I'm just gonna play a piece of a song that I learned.
Oh yeah, you gotta tell him the age.
Well, actually, that was a later riff. That was a lot later.
Oh well, I thought.
I mean, come on. Well, the first song I think I really learned all the way through was. What's funny is later I learned the harmony chords to that.
Yeah.
And learned how to write or work with the harmony chords. But it's one of those songs you don't real. That's one of the ones I was saying. You don't realize that you're playing the wrong thing on one side or the other. But I think, believe it or not, the first song I learned how to play was I don't know if it was. It's one of the first ones I learned how, or that I can remember that I played, and I don't remember how old it is. I think it's 1970, early 70s, but it was American Pie.
Yeah, I know my mom listens to this, so I'm going to tell the story about learning Iron Man as my first song.
Sure.
So I had been clued into Black Sabbath a little bit before that because other people were wearing Black Sabbath T-shirts and stuff at school, and I was like, yeah, I gotta check them out because like there's gotta be something there. I've never heard any of their music. Like, why is it so mysterious? And actually, the whole idea of a Black Sabbath kind of turned me off to it because I was like, I don't really want to be the guy that's listening to all the Satan
Right, the
music,
devil
the
music.
devil
Yeah.
music,
Ooh.
right? Ooh. So anyway, later on, of course, I found out the whole story about the name and everything, and like it put in perspective. I'm 13, 14 years old this time, so I'm kind of naive. Um, and I start listening to Black Sabbath, whatever, and I get the reunion album because that was the thing when I was a kid, right?
Yeah,
Um,
of
and
course.
it's okay. Like there's nothing really wrong with it, except for the drummer isn't the right drummer. Um,
Yeah.
long story on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, actually, I think he may have been on there for some of it, but he wasn't on there for all of it. Like, there's like a whole, it's a weird thing. Anyway, um, I see Guitar World right after I get my first guitar. I see Guitar
Yep.
World has a transcription of Ironman, and so I learned Ironman. And part of the reason I liked Black Sabbath, but I wasn't like in love with Black Sabbath at that time. And it was funny because I saw the song and I went, that song sounds metal as hell. And I know that I'm really not, like, my parents really didn't buy me a guitar for me to play metal. So I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. And I honestly, like, there were a couple times growing up where my mom would come and she'd be like, you're listening to this crap and, like, you're going to learn to play this on guitar or whatever. And, like, it's just crap. I didn't buy a guitar for you to play this kind of junk. And I just totally I would get pissed at her and pretend like I was gonna quit playing guitar, but like in the back of my mind I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Like right? Like that was the kind of attitude. It was the rebellious, it's like, no, it does suck and you don't like it, and therefore that's what I'm gonna learn
And
to
that's
do.
what I'm going to learn. Yeah.
And it's so funny because like growing
Quite
up,
natural.
that happened during Rage Against the, I was listening to a live album from Rage Against the Machine or something, and she was like, "This sounds like crap," and I didn't buy a guitar to hear this kind of noise and this garbage. Actually, the deal was, Jim, I was watching it and she was vacuuming, so I turned the TV up and she got pissed off because it was
Yeah.
like, you turned the TV up over my vacuum. And I wanted to
Yeah.
be like, you're vacuuming while I'm watching TV. Like, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
Um,
Right.
there's a lot of butting heads in my house. People are deciding to do things that just totally do not mesh well with others. Um, and she would vacuum like every day. She's still a bit of a neat freak. But she has a spotless house, so can't complain. Um,
Yep. I
but
cannot say the same.
it was just funny because like a lot of that is what drove me to learn stuff like that, was this whole idea that my parents didn't like this, so I'm gonna go check it out now. Or my
Right.
parents don't know anything about this, so I'm gonna go check it out. And that's how I got into Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Jimi Hendrix, all these different artists that my parents were not into. Like, to go back to what we were talking about earlier. And so learning that riff is probably the most useless part of information you could possibly learn as a kid. Except, and I'll put this in perspective. So when I learned it at the 12th fret, like you're supposed to, right? That's the Tony Iommi approved way. And I
Right. Right.
know
Right.
Randy Rhoads didn't play it that way, and I know Jackie Lee didn't play it that way. I think Zach might actually play it correctly, but I would not be surprised if he doesn't play it at the 7th fret. And the reason why it's so interesting that I learned it the correct way was because the first song I learned to play, when you stop and you think about the idiosyncrasies of putting the notes in a specific place on the neck and the explanation that went along with the tab explaining why he did it, and the light bulb went on in my head about tone being important and him
Yep.
selecting that. And that was like everything I did from that moment on was like, this is an interpretation of what someone else has done, and I don't have to sound like everybody else, but I can choose whether I want to do, and therefore that makes me perform their music in my own way. And that's when I became like an interpretive guitarist, in the sense that I wasn't so concerned about playing with the way other people did. I realized that there were conscious decisions being made about that, and that I could make those decisions too. Um,
Yeah. That's how I learned interpretive dance. No,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. Jim, could you show us some of your interpretive dance? We do have video tonight. Yeah, strike a pose. Kid and
let
play.
me give my
No.
duck face.
Oh yeah, don't ever do
So
that
yeah,
again.
guys. All right. So um, Yeah, so we got to get into the. Someone had said we're starting to get towards the end of the show. And we got to do some housekeeping. But before that, I want to talk about one thing. We have a Teespring shop. By the way,
Threadless.
there should be
Threadless.
threadless. Thank you, threadless. We have a threadless.
Maybe
shop.
I'll make a Teespring shop too.
You should. But anyway, we have a threadless store. I'm gonna get myself a coffee mug, but this week, so I have it for next week. Hopefully, depending on how long it takes to ship. But anyway, I know we have a Patreon page. Please Patreon us. One of the things that one of the listeners was asking is, can you guys challenge each other to play a song in each other's styles? And
that would be even funnier than what we were proposing the other night.
Yes.
Was if I was to give you one of the chords. I should give you, because I have all the backing tracks for my stuff. I should give you a backing track from one of my songs.
Well, one of yours, yeah.
And then you should give me a backing track from one of yours, or something that you play regularly.
So I'm gonna give David this song that we all know and we have all played. Let me see if I can do it sitting this way. It is difficult for me to play in this position, by the way. But so I was gonna have him do.
The funny part is I already know how to play the riff.
Yeah, he probably does. So I was messing with it today. Let's just say that on acoustic, it's harder to play the same chord shapes.
Yeah,
because they're up here.
Yeah.
Those last chord shapes are up here.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot different, folks. Challenge accepted. I'm going to try to do it on I'm going to try to double it.
Okay.
So I'm going to do it on a Strat and either the SG or the Les Paul.
All right.
And then I'm going to add the acoustic to it.
And
you got to put the drums over it.
You want me to put drums on it, and you want me to put a lead guitar part on it, right?
You're going to put I'll put one of the solos on, but you can always play over it, and then the other one. So, now, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that thing I put in by the Band Geeks.
I did.
But that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to like my comment on it.
I haven't read the comment.
It's one of my favorite songs, and I listened to it. I was like, you missed the groove. Like deeply. I was just like, damn it. I wanted it to be so good. I wanted it to be so good. I did. And I was just like, no, this is not how you do this.
The Band Geeks are... Yeah,
they're really good. No, dude, they're really good. In fact, their Yes covers are spot on. And I'm a big fan of their Yes covers. So when I saw they were doing Sledgehammer, I was like, oh, yes. And then I watched about 2 minutes of it. I was like, no.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember that their sensibilities are also in pop and in, of course, Richie plays with Blue Oyster Cult, but
no. And I think they do appreciate it. I just don't think that, like, the whole band, I think probably Richie probably knew how it was supposed to go, but I feel like the rest of the band was just playing it straight, and that's that old school, like, funk feel that has this really deep groove, and I just didn't feel it. If you're playing Sledgehammer and you're not going like this the whole time, then you're doing it wrong. I just missed it. And that bass better be the loudest thing in the band. Like, that's the other thing.
And I was losing it there. Not that their bass player, I've heard him play a lot of stuff.
He's exceptional.
He's spot on. But I think that there was something missing, and you got to remember, Ann is as far as a vocalist goes, Ann is trained in classical and like Broadway type stuff.
She's quite good. I don't know. I've never had a negative interpretation of anything she's done, but
no, it just wasn't right. It wasn't what we were expecting.
I wanted real.
It felt like a show tunes.
It should have felt like Stax and Volt rhythm is what it should have sounded like, because that's what that song is an ode to.
Yet, if you listen to them do Aces High with that was stellar, and I was surprised how well Bumblefoot played that or sang that song.
Yeah,
I knew
he's a great singer. He's a great singer, actually. Believe it or not,
sing his butt off.
Oh yeah, dude, you should get some of his records. He's freaking psychotic with how good he is on vocals. It's crazy.
He is crazy good.
I recommend Abby Normal. And there's
Happy Normal. That's one of my
It's one
favorite
of the name of the
things.
songs, yeah. And then there's another record. Reach out to me. I'll give you the other record because they're both great. And he does a lot of vocals on them. And the crazy thing is, if you've ever seen him live, he does I haven't seen him live, but I've seen enough live footage. He does the vocals while he's playing some of these songs, and you just can't believe that he's doing both at the same time. It's unbelievable. It's like he has a part of his brain is separated. The part that controls the vocals is totally separate from the part that controls guitar. It's like two people living in one body. It's nuts.
He's incredible.
It's inhuman.
But yeah, I've heard them do Roundabout, and they kill
Roundabout, Close to the Edge is the one that gets me though.
Close to the Edge.
Close to the Edge is one of the hardest songs you could possibly play, and they just nail it.
Yep, and they did Starship
Troopers. I want to hear him do the Black Page.
Oh, that would be
because
cool.
I'm pretty sure they could probably play
to Richie and say,
I should reach out to Richie and be like, hey guys, you can do some Zappa. Can you do the Black Page? How about Titties and Beer?
They used to do like a live request show, and Richie would do live requests. He'd do
I think a lot of the Zappa music is like unapproachable for a lot of people though, because like I said, that song Titties and Beer, for example, like even the name is like sexist, misogynist, like to the extreme. And you got to remember this, the context of the era in which that stuff was written, and you don't necessarily have to agree with Frank to appreciate it. So that's why I kind of like give him a pass on certain things.
People forget that sometimes it's not necessarily Frank's feelings. It's what Frank is observing. The other day I'm driving down the road, right?
I think Frank was not a misogynist, but I think he was a little bit more in line with his lyrics than many people realize. But
as long as he didn't eat the yellow snow.
Yeah.
But there was I was driving down the road, and there's a gentleman's club on the left-hand side of the road, right?
Yeah.
And a guy pulls out from his driveway in his truck, right? And it's a big white trash truck, and he passes me. And what does he have in the back window? Blankies, B00BIES.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Make me smile. And he's got that with like two of those things, like in like in the sticker. And
I don't know if the video caught me sighing hard enough there.
And it was the timing of it, because we're just passing a place called Headlights. Yes, it's called Headlights, folks. And it just.
And did he cut you off to go in there? Because that would have made the story that much.
No, he didn't go. They've got a big thing. We're close. Stay safe. But it's just funny that this guy lives right across the road. I'm like, well,
I wonder where he works.
He's their biggest patron.
Yeah, he might work there.
My sons were laughing their butts off there.
Yeah.
That guy's definitely, that's his home. But anyway, it's just one of those things that I thought that would be funny to write about, because that's funny.
Yeah,
right?
But I think exactly. And I do think there's a lot of stuff in his music. There's one song in particular I'm thinking off on Man from Utopia, and if you know the record, you probably know the one I'm talking about, that is totally observational, and it's gross and it's disgusting, but it's totally observational, and it's played for comedy. But I mean, we're talking about a guy that wrote a song called Dangerous Kitchen, which is literally like scatting over how dangerous the kitchen is. Yeah, pretty much. I don't know. So I don't know. We didn't talk a whole lot about guitar. We talked a lot about music tastes this episode. Did you have any like specific guitar commentary? Actually, we're talking about songs you want to do, right? So like I could give you one of my backing tracks and have you play over that.
That's going to be interesting.
The other thing we should do is we should probably pick one track that's kind of like middle ground. And I think we were talking about that last week. We should do Aces High.
Yeah. Aces High. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, so we'll go back and forth. Maybe we'll get that done or not. But at least I'll do the Barracuda thing for sure. And I'm sure I can give you my backing tracks, so that's not a big deal.
Yeah. So I'll sing over it. I'll probably have to layer my voice like 15 times.
You'll have to come up with a lead line. I'm not giving you any of my guitar parts. You're just gonna have to figure it out and muddle through it.
Oh, you're talking about the one you sent me?
Yeah, I'm literally gonna give you like drums and bass.
Yeah.
And you just be like,
wait, you gotta
go.
give me some harmony. not gonna give me harmony.
You can't get that from the bass.
That
It
bass will give me
you'll hear it.
melody.
It'll outline chords.
Okay.
You'll be like, all right, okay, I kind of get it. Or even if it's just the vaguest outline of chords, you can kind of
Right.
build around it.
Yeah. Yeah. That I can do.
I think that makes it more interesting. Is like you can see what kind of harmony comes out of like your
That I come up
interpretation of
with.
what my bass line was. Because
Yeah.
I can guarantee you it ain't gonna be like mine. My harmony
No
is
charts.
like bordering on no harmony.
This will let everybody know that is the sheet music to Barracuda from.
Yeah, he's using the charts. I'm like, he's like, learn to play. He's like, can you learn to play Barracuda? I'm like, yeah. I mean, I'm not even thinking
Yeah.
about charts. I'm just thinking about, yeah, I can probably, yeah, I'm thinking about the
Well,
melody.
I'm
Yeah, I
charting
can
it
do that.
because I'm playing two guitar parts and singing all the vocals.
Just as long as I get to lay a solo down on there, that's all I really want to do. And then you're going to be like, that was not what I expected. That's kind of where I'm going with it. So, but yeah, no, it sounds like a fun exercise, and maybe we'll show it off
Yeah.
in the group. And I want to get a round table going for the group too, but I haven't figured
Yeah.
that out yet. So somebody in the
Yeah, we got to
Facebook
get
group-
somebody who. Well, I know Mike Mara would be somebody who could be able to. I don't know if he'd be willing, but be able to throw some stuff down over one of our song choices as well. And
Yeah,
of course,
no,
I'm sure he would love to throw something
He
at
is
us.
monstrous too. I will tell you
I
that.
don't-
I have been on stage with him.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah, oh yeah, I've seen
the real deal.
recordings.
He's legit.
Yeah.
His band. So to give you an idea of what he's doing, Jim, his band is doing a tribute to Jeff Beck. Like they are a Jeff Beck tribute band right now. It's a trio that does Jeff Beck tunes, and it's quite good. They play like Nadia and stuff. Yeah.
He'd throw rotten food at me.
Yeah, it's and he's quite good at it too. Like he sent me
Throwing rotten food?
that too, yeah. He looks like he's a big guy, so I think he could be. I think he could throw a decent fastball. Anyway, he was showing me some clips of him doing rehearsing, or actually, no, I think these were live clips from the board of his last show, and he was some of the Jeff Beck tunes, and he's doing all the whammy bar stuff and all that, and I'm like, dude. Like, I just like it makes me want to quit because he he's got his style down so good. I mean, not that I'm not decent at guitar, proficient or whatever, but like I just hear that and I'm like, man, the dedication, devotion, and just like natural ability there is like other level, and I have to really work at it to get to that point, and I just feel like I'm so far behind, and he's younger than I am too, which makes it worse. So.
Well, you're younger than I am. You are literally young enough to be my kid.
but Jim, but think about it. Like the level of guitar playing when you were a kid versus what it is now is like a whole other ball game.
Night and day.
Yeah,
it really is. There were much fewer, what do they call it, wunderkinds, as there are now.
I think a lot of it's just the ceiling wasn't as high, so people didn't set their sights as high. You didn't have Van Halen to be like when you were like 10 years old, you weren't like looking at Van Halen and going, that's what I want to do. And now people are like, Van Halen, he's not even that good.
Yeah. What we will have to have an eruption off one of these days.
Yeah, we could do that. We could do that.
That'd be fun.
I think we should do an Yngwie off.
Oh God. You're kind of going a little fast.
You want to play Far Beyond the Sun with me?
I'll hold down the bass line.
Yeah. I don't know. Yngwie plays his own bass parts, right?
Yeah, I know. It's just but at least I could probably pull that off.
I don't think I could pull any Yngwie off, honestly. I could probably do like I Am a Viking or something like that.
Yeah,
or Paradise or whatever it is. But I don't think I could probably do something off of that first record. He's still one of those dudes that like his style is so specific that in order to play his music, you really have to hone in on his style.
Exactly.
And I just don't have the devotion to be like, I'm going to learn to play Yngwie.
Right.
I don't mind adapting some of his techniques. Like obviously I've done that, but I'm not going to be the dude that's like, I'm going to learn, Black Star. And I knew a guy that could play Black Star and then turn around and go play a bunch of Pantera stuff. And he was in my first band for like 2 weeks. And it was so funny because he was so much better than we were at the time. And then he went around and told people after he stopped coming to rehearsals or what, he went around and told people how much we sucked or whatever. And I could just remember thinking like for a long time,
what a jerk.
I can remember thinking for a long time, like, yeah, he can talk shit all he wants, but someday I'm going to be better than him. And I haven't run into him in a while. I hear rumblings of him every now and then. I don't think he's playing with anybody,
Yeah.
and that's just
Well,
an attitude issue. Like,
somebody, yeah, I was going to say somebody with an attitude like that doesn't matter how good they are. Nobody wants them around after a
I was
while.
smart enough at that time that I saw this guy being really good, and I was like, I want to learn from him. Like, I want to pay attention
Right.
to what he's doing. And I'm certain that there were things that I knew how to do even back then that he couldn't. But he was very good at certain things too. So it's like it's a give and take thing. Like everybody, when you evaluate a player, don't ever throw them under the bus because I can guarantee you they have something in their bag of tricks, even a beginner,
That you,
that you
that's
don't
right.
get.
Right.
Um,
There is always something you can learn.
yeah. So just take a step back, try to evaluate it for what it is, and don't ever think that a player is better or worse. This is not a competition.
Nope. Nope. Last I checked, it is
I
not a competition.
I have been David,
I'm a Jim.
and we have been Practical Guitarists on
Yes,
video.
we have.